Okay, other result.
So
We're gonna plug her. I mean, plug it back into.
well, this already is connected. You can see it.
Oh, okay, so that was just.
It's a separate cable that we.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so if you want to share.
So
this.
down there, you just log into this.
That's what I was gonna say, sometimes to get into the Zoom.
Yeah, once you get into Zoom, you can share it.
No,
Are
I'm
you
just
doing
gonna
those
do
Zoom?
mute
Not yet,
because
but
people want
probably better. Cause I don't even know what
feedback.
the Zoom is.
Right, they want-
It's in our, they just send an email, but I can do second.
Or still use snowball, so. Could be. Or just go around for a little bit.
Do you need to- I can send it, like,
Ariana, give me a mic check real quick.
One piece.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
We're gonna have to wait for her to log into the Zoom
For it to
first.
come up
I'm
with
gonna have
the
to already
document.
hear it. It's-
Is that a no? That didn't work.
I'm gonna be-
Yeah, sure.
You want a mic check, please?
Mic check, Ariana.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Nancy. She's like, I don't see you.
I can share with my snacks. I can.
Snacks are good.
How about I send it to you and
Can't
I'll.
pass up popcorn.
Okay, are you on?
I'm done just a second.
Okay,
I don't
I
have.
see you.
And
Ariana.
wanted to just send it, but I can also go to what our document is. Am I bringing up the first one?
Yeah.
And we'll just click share. One show.
Okay, if you want me to, I'm doing the.
Where was it hearings from? Over there?
Yep.
Okay.
Just.
And I might.
Didn't know. I should pick up.
Not a problem for me.
I know.
Hi, so
With the exception,
I like-
my mouth is full.
I like teams usually though, so let's see how I do here.
This is like Teams, that's slightly different.
Yeah.
But nothing just enough way to make it confusing.
I'll make
There
it
we go.
bigger,
All
too.
right, that's-
I got big.
Zoom in.
Yeah. You can even see it.
And then if you want to hide that
Oh,
for yourself, you can hit this little right there.
This one.
There you go. And this just makes it easier for you to see.
Thank you.
All right, you should be good. I'll need anything else.
Good afternoon, all. We will get started in just a moment. You're planning to join the E&B subwork group, you're in the right place.
Yeah, might as well.
Oh, here we go, here we go.
Good.
So welcome everyone in the room and also online to the eligibility and benefits subwork group meeting with coming to you live from WEDI National. And Donna Campbell is my fabulous co-chair. I don't know if, I know we've introduced through some of the subwork groups earlier today in the room, so I don't know if we necessarily need to do that, but I would just say, for those that maybe didn't join earlier, I'm Amanda Abbott. I'm with Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas. I'm the manager of our EDI operations and system support department there. To our external stakeholders, providers, and a couple other blue payers that we support front-end EDI services for. We're also known as Ask EDI or Administrative Services of Kansas. So just wanted to share that and a little bit about me, and had been at Blue Cross for almost 11 years now. And Donna, if you don't mind, just, I know everyone probably already knows you, but maybe just, okay, so maybe say a little bit about you if you don't mind, my dear.
I'm Donna Campbell. I'm with Healthcare Service Corporation, which most people know it as Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, or Montana. I am over the provider portal and provider connectivity area, which is technically anything related to the 27X transactions, with the exception of the 278. And I have been there for almost 29 years. Why I have such gray hair. And I've been co-chair of the EMB sub-work group now for a number of years, and I'm also a
How many?
co-chair at what?
How many?
I don't really know, actually. And I've been a co-chair, I can tell you how long I've been a co-chair at X12. I'm a benefit information work group co-chair, and I've been a co-chair with the exception of one meeting for roughly 24 years.
So a long time and a lot of experience.
Little. I'm also over, like I mentioned, the 270, 271 at home, so I have like day-to-day exposure to problems and solutions and workarounds, and a lot of the RFIs that get submitted are either near and dear to my heart, or I've submitted them, or I've encouraged people to submit them. And Amanda, who is also a fellow Blues sister, we kind of share a lot of the same pain points, but because we're different organizations, we have different perspectives. So it just depends on which position perspective you sit in, whether or not you're representing a payer, representing a clearinghouse, like in her case, where it's both, or you're representing a vendor or a provider. Now, I don't know, I know most of you, except for you guys I just met, I think most people have been around today, all day.
So we probably, I mean, unless you, maybe at the end, if we have time and there's like nothing to talk about, we can go around in the room again, but I believe a majority of us that are in the room have already done introductions, so if that's okay. with
Yep,
you.
no, and then really what Amanda and I have been trying to do for the last several meetings is to come up with what we want to work on over the course of the years. We've kind of had some ebbs and flows when it comes to what we're focusing on. And every year, pretty much every year, our data exchange leadership, which oversees all of the sub-work groups for all intents and purposes, they challenge us to have some kind of project or something that we are going to deliver every year. And we've been attempting to deliver a couple things for a couple of years. And we did recently deliver a podcast with Michael early, maybe it was a little bit earlier last year in 2024. And then we had an issue brief where we talked about tiered benefits from like a very simplistic tiered benefit point of view. We didn't get into like all the minutia that comes with tiered benefits, but we did tackle one particular type of tiered benefits when it was based on, say, the provider themselves. And we had over probably the last 9 months been going back and forth with our sub-work group on what do we want to aim for and focus on from a sub-work group project proposal. And we literally spent probably 4.5 months just going over the ideas of what we could do, because there were plenty, and there's a lot of them coming in from different industry points of view, as well as what we want to solve as like a predicament or a problem. So some of the suggestions were the No Surprises Act and coming up with maybe with the advanced explanation of benefits or the cost estimation concept, whether or not there's a role for the 270, 271 to play in that space. There were some thoughts about coverage requirements discovery and what do we have in common and what are we overlapping with CRD in the space that is covered by the CMS 57 interop requirements. And then there were more day-to-day troubles that we experience. You know, why are we getting so many phone calls? And we've had a number of years we've been sharing that whole phone call volume predicament since at least 2018, when I remember being in near San Diego, I think, when we had a conference there. Yeah, La Jolla. And we presented there, not Amanda and I, but someone else and I presented there some the outcomes of a survey that we shared back in 2017, 2018. And then there were 2 reasons on that survey back almost 8 years ago, which was they couldn't get the prior auth information using the 270, 271, and that's why people were calling, and that people weren't returning. I was a little amazed at the fact of 2018. They weren't returning copay, deductible, co-insurance, out of pocket. They weren't returning some of that information, and in some cases, they weren't even supporting 5010. And I'm like, just taken aback at like why we're not supporting 50-10 24 years later, but. And still people say that they aren't supporting 50-10. And here we are approaching and possibly 80-60. We're gonna have a lot of catching up to do if they haven't even moved themselves to 50-10. But so we had toyed with the work group on what two angles we want to take. And at the last sub work group meeting, Amanda was on a business trip, so she didn't get to participate in the call, but we did have a conversation about two potential ideas that we could take into 2026, which one of them has to do with the same conversation about the increased phone calls. But then another one that we thought we could do, which that means it's two that we would tackle. And that means also that those two that we would tackle means we need the work group to contribute to two. And so the second one was around I'm pulling up there, how the high volume is happening to a lot of payers monthly at the beginning of the month, it seems like. And there's some new vendor tooling and solutions that are happening out there that are blasting payers and doing almost roster validation. And when some of those payers have gone back to look at their claim volume for the very same high volume 270s that are coming in that first week of every month, they're not seeing any significant claims coming in. So there's this question of, are they using the 270, 271 in a real-time world as a roster validation in the event that there'll be a claim? So they'll have the most current up-to-date information. And it seems to be a very common thing for Medicaids, because Medicaids can have a 30-day window for every time
They're definitely doing that.
Yes,
Right.
but we've been told that there's some of the vendor solutions out there that when they rolled this out to do this for the Medicaids, they made it so it's available for everybody that the provider sees. So it's not just a Medicaid specific solution. So when they push that button to say validate or verify eligibility, it's pumping out the entire large hospital, potentially
Yeah.
thousands
There's
upon
nobody
thousands.
telling them what the downsides of doing that is. And that's probably what takes, makes all of a sudden eligibility volume goes off the rails.
Oh, it does. And we and my company did a little analysis, and the first 6 months, it was January through June, which we do about 1 million transactions a day for the 270, which, it's 30 million a month. In a single day, we were getting upwards in that first week, 17 million a day. And it was bringing us to our knees. And then any partner that we were going through, or they were going through to us, bringing them to their knees. So we were like 17 million, that was quite a bit. And then we were discovering that, and not a lot of these guys are even our member. So they're just randomly checking a bunch of all the payers and spraying these transactions to these variety of payers to try to get a hit, and really trying to get a hit to validate their roster system, make sure that the person that's in their system who says they had certain coverage really still has that coverage, but also looking for COB. And so now they can have that 2 and 3 and 4 trifecta if they can find this additional COB. And then they have this payer of last resort concept with Medicaid, where Medicaid shouldn't pay first, it should always pay last. So if there's other commercial insurance in front of them, we got to send it to them first, and then we'll get what's left paid by Medicaid, hopefully. So we're seeing that even when we do the analysis in our company setting, that a lot of these aren't translating into claims. And of what we found in our company, only 3 claims came through for 3 different members, and we're talking, millions upon millions upon millions every day for the first 5 days of the month, every single month. And we're like, if only 3 people turn into a claim, is this an appropriate transaction protocol? Maybe it's the right transaction, but maybe not real time. And then maybe there needs to be a better transaction either built or elevated. There used to be one many years ago that X12 had. It was called the 271 unsolicited healthcare eligibility and benefit roster. And it literally had the term roster in it. And so it basically kind of fell off around that 40-50 time because nobody had said they wanted it. So maybe that's something that needs to be brought forward to X12 and say, we want to bring that up to current state, move that roster from 40-10 and 80-60, format and then have that be available to people. So when they're implementing the 270, 271, if one day the 8060 is mandated for use, at the same time, they could technically be initiating the changes for an 8060 roster, because it's a one-way transaction that goes from the payer out the door to the provider, or the payer to a payer, or a provider to a provider. It doesn't have to be a two-way transaction, and it could be scheduled.
And
Well,
like you
okay.
said, we don't know how much the No Surprises Act and the good faith estimate stuff is factoring into driving that. People checking,
Yes.
double checking, looking for aggregators and.
Mhm.
And I'd say one thing, we talked about in the last session that you were in here for claim status from a blue perspective, and I understand that everyone in here is not a blue payer. But how the association did provide some guidelines around the transaction volume and what we should educate both our submitters, trading partners, vendors, clearinghouses, and providers about, which doesn't mean that they're going to do it or listen to it, but there has been recently, like in September, some information of some guide. I know this is different and would be more involved if we went about this, but just wanted to share that because it doesn't address the whole industry. It addresses the blues and their providers. Yes.
And specifically, the concept of member roster being pushed down to the providers is problematic from an identity management and privacy standpoint. So under FHIR, we have the member roster capabilities that allow the HL7 FHIR transaction to say, I have this patient, please tell me who has data about them. And part of the data about them is that member attribution, which payer has services, specifically APIs that
Right.
will serve data about that patient.
That's interesting too.
And that also, it coincides with work that CAQH4 was doing last year with the member single patient attribution operating rules that they built, that they did not move to the final stages because there just wasn't, it sounded like there wasn't either enough interest or there was more interest in some of the other work that they had on their plate. And then they were going to come back around with those operating rules. And those operating rules are based on what everybody's supposed to be supporting today, which is the 270, 271 under HIPAA. So naturally, everyone should have some kind of vehicle to support that 270, 271. And then it tells them like how you would use it to attribute a patient in that, really in the VBC model, but it could be extrapolated for any model. So hopefully we can aim for a project proposal that is possibly, to go to your point, like format independent, so we don't have to necessarily name whether it's a 270, 271, or it's a FHIR API, but really talk about the best practices, like when do you do these things? Why do you do these things? And are you going to be doing these things for the sole purpose of just updating your roster? Or is it also because you're eventually going to see this member because maybe they have a care journey or a care management that requires them like once a month or once every other week to come in for dialysis or shots or testing, and that you need to keep that updated, especially in the Medicaid world. So those are two project proposals, of which neither one of them we've committed to. Those are the ones that we documented. And we had said that on the last call, we kind of built out the one project proposal that talked about the reasons for calling. And then we added on a little bit of notes to keep that one separate. Just so we knew if we wanted to do a second project proposal, we would move that material off. So that's the second one about,
Do you want me to change?
no, the first one is about the reasons for calling and the high number still of calls, even though you have 17 million in a day, 270s coming in. And then the second one is how can we structure best practices for payers or their vendor solutions to not inundate payers on that first week of the month, and maybe either spread it out or recommend a batch concept, because if it's not in
But
on
would another
demand,
technology like FHIR, would that be more efficient?
it might be,
or-
but it's
I mean-
also real time.
Yeah. Are we asking the right question? You know, is the bottom, do we need the transaction? I mean, do we need the information? Just through a different technique, which I guess that's what you're saying with the batch.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess that's the problem. It doesn't matter what the format is.
Right.
If you're getting inundated every month, you're getting inundated every month. And whether it's an API call or it's a different API with a formatted transaction like a 270, 270, it's still that volume that they're getting that isn't translating into claims. So there's some better way to do something. And if you didn't have that vehicle available, whether it's fire or the 270, 271, how else would they get this information? Would they go to the member and say, hey, do you have other coverage when they're coming in to see them? Or would they pick up the phone and call the payer, which is even more expensive than a 270 or a fire solution? So then those are the questions we have to ask is what is the underlying reason? The reason why these monthly validations are so necessary. And if that is truly a need, then washing them of this idea that they have to do these real-time inquiries.
And why monthly? Why not weekly? What is it about the monthly concept?
We were told
Medicaid.
the Medicaid world is
Is
because
it the monthly?
the 30 days
Change
that
every
they have eligibility
So
that
you
can
kind of-
change.
Kind of
every
got your
30 days.
answer there, is
Mhm.
that it's monthly because it's Medicaid.
And it happens on the first of the month, because if you have coverage normally on the first of the month, you have it on.
Right, and so that's why they hit you that first week.
We have some feedback from payers, including Kansas, that providers have incentives or are incentivized to self-serve, and for some reason, I don't know if they think that doing their whole roster shows that they've done all this volume for a given month, regardless if it's the first day. I don't know all the details. We haven't gotten into the details of that, but that they're being incentivized, like quality reimbursement for self-service, but why do it this way? Why do they
Right.
think they have to do it
Why
this
is
way?
there,
I
why
don't
is that
know.
commonality of
I think
once a
it's
month?
The
Yeah.
things that you all have just mentioned is probably part of it.
Well, it's just if they can, have a patient encounter that month for their schedule, if they've somehow lost eligibility, provider wants to know.
But maybe I wanna do it the
They
week
do all of their
before.
reimbursements.
I mean,
Well,
I wouldn't want anything that much. I just wonder if that, maybe it could be understood, that monthly thing, which sounds like we are starting to, that might give us some underlying understanding for the volume.
Well, mostly patients gain or lose eligibility on a monthly basis. Sometimes it happens mid-month, but that's pretty rare.
What's the advantage of knowing that? Well in advance, so like if my appointment isn't until the end of the month, what's my
If
advantage
we're
for?
trying to schedule it.
Oh, because you only have to, okay, so I send out 1,000. I only get back 50 that don't have eligibility. I only have to work those 50 that month, not all 1,000.
And they might show up for an unscheduled appointment, urgent care or whatever, so. Again, if they show up at the front desk, it's really helps to know if they've somehow lost eligibility as of last month.
No, that makes sense. It's just I wonder how everybody magically coalesced around the monthly timeframe. It just seems like maybe to do with the monthly changes.
Yes, usually
Yeah.
monthly changes, even, most commercial plans. Typically, employees gain or lose eligibility on a monthly basis. Sometimes somebody gets fired mid-month and they immediately, but that's rare.
Or die.
Yeah,
I thought I guess it's not maybe a requirement, but like when I go in, if they're, might not be my provider, I guess, but I thought providers, when the patient comes in, does it at that time as well, real time, but maybe that's just me in my head saying they
Well, I
do
think
it.
that's what we're thinking about, the traditional way. That's what I was
Yeah.
alluding to, the traditional way. I would want to do it, shortly before they come in or something, but. They're looking at proactive actions they can take
And
well in advance and that. makes sense.
Hospital at home infusion providers never see the patient
Gotcha.
in
Yeah,
the
that makes
office.
sense.
I mean, yeah.
That's another good.
So
point.
you're
sense.
going more with the hospital at home, those are gonna all start to, if they're not already, are going to. So anybody that doesn't physically see the patient and where you say like get a card, they don't get a card,
Gotcha.
and it's only as good as the hospital information sent down the line, so.
Yeah, I'm sure telehealth and telemedicine have something to do with it too.
Exactly.
So I'm trying to take a couple notes and obviously like 16 words. Because we basically all say the same thing. I think the other, without naming names, because I also don't want to, I don't want to draw out anyone who is a solution vendor that is saying, oh yeah, we're doing this monthly, and then have to have them explain themselves. One, because, that's not why we're here. It's not here to place blame. But it is to help understand, because we may need to go back to our organizations. And I can tell you, I've been heavily involved in what Amanda was talking about earlier with some of the blues conversations and the what are we doing? Because it isn't like it's a bad thing. There's good reason for these eligibility and benefit verifications, real time or not. The heart of it, when it comes to the problem statement for the payers is it was kind of a surprise. Like we were taken by surprise. So in some cases, we worked with our vendors who we know are submitting these large volumes and said, do this off hours because you're getting in the way of real people going to the hospital or real people going in for elective surgeries. And we need to capture what their co-payment, deductible, out-of-pocket benefit maximums are, et cetera. And now because you brought some people to their knees or because it's first in, first out, or a lot of asynchronous, but still, there's still some
Cascade.
funneling that has to
Lots of
happen.
cascading.
That it's causing some immediate distress. And then, like in my organization, a lot of our backend services are shared services. So it doesn't matter if they come in through the phone, if they come in through a portal, if they come in through a vendor, it's all gonna ultimately go to that same backend. So that wasn't prepared. So when we were getting massively hit, and then we were recognizing that they weren't all ours, so we would pump them through to other plans. When we knew, well, now there were infrastructure pieces in between that weren't ready to handle this volume. And then multiply that by the number of Blues plans, or even multiply that by the vendors, the clearinghouses that are supporting multiple payers, period. So we're not just talking a Blues problem, we're talking, Availity, for example, who has a clearinghouse feature. They may be trying to send all these transactions, and this brought some of the performance issues to them as well. So when Availity was having an issue, it wasn't like Availity connected to Blue Cross of Illinois was having the issue. When Availity was having an issue, it was impacting every payer that they were connecting to. So now they've damaged the protocols for a person who was at the doctor because they were having to figure out how to size and perform with the massive hits that they were getting with these point solution vendors. So we really wanted to take a look at that, and it was a good suggestion when someone brought it up several months ago. And we thought, well, can we tackle it in the same paper? And then we thought, well, because there's really a different probably outcome that we'll look at, like some of it's gonna be best practices for how you can use some of the capabilities in 270, 271 today and 5010 to curb the phone calls. And some of those are just gonna be best practices on maybe time of day, maybe reasons for the B&B, just a host of things that, again, doesn't matter the format at that point. Doesn't matter if it's the fire or if it's X12 or if it's technically any other kind of means to get this information. It could be completely separate. So our thought was just separate them and make 2 project proposals and have this group decide, is one more important to you than the other, to focus on, say, 2026 out of the gate. And then if we get done with it early, we roll into the second one. Do we want to do both and maybe divide and conquer and have people who are more interested in the volume problem, have those guys contribute to that? People who are working on the best practice on how you can reduce your phone calls, we can have a separate group on that, and then have them done together in parallel, but in separate work streams.
And I know you,
Yeah.
it might not be related to what.
No, it is
that
actually.
question was. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was curious about your shared services on the back end. Do you mean to say that someone calls your call center and that person needs to run an eligibility lookup on a person, they can't do it because everybody else is flooding your shared services? Or is that not impacting?
It could be impacting. So the way that our architecture is we have some back-end benefit inquiry services that are checking your membership, your provider, your benefits,
Right.
your accums, your limitations, your trying to think of a few other things, any TPA that might be involved, any other COB that might be involved, and then also checking to see if there's a involvement, like a utilization management for prior authorization. So there's a whole bunch of calls that we make. So the 270 in my world comes in through one URI. And then we have a phone call channel that's handled up front, and we try to contain the phone call as much as possible. So in the automated system, it doesn't have to reach to a customer advocate, a person, a live body on the phone to talk to the provider. So what they're doing is there's bots that are running out there that are doing these verifications through the phone channel. So we have these huge heavy volume vendors sending us 270s. Then we have these bots that are just going through a roster and making phone calls. And they're all hitting the same benefit inquiry service that has the same membership provider and benefit lookup. the ACUMES if they apply, the TPA or the UM service. All of those services are getting hit by all these multiple calls. And they're called from these two channels, and those are just two of the several channels. We have a couple other channels. So it's that part where we have all the benefit systems, that one system supports all the access channels. And it's the different type of access channels that define whether or not you're gonna just check a member. You're gonna check a member and a provider. You're gonna check a member, provider, and then the benefits. Oh, the member, provider, and the benefits are covered. Now you wanna go to the ACUMES. All of that's getting hit. And when it's getting pounded by any out of the ordinary volume, then it's slowing down all the other calls that are getting. I liken it like to an expressway. When you come up to an accident, everybody stops. We all look, don't lie. You all look. But at the end of the day, it's a 4-lane road, and we could all be driving great if we just have the right number of cars on the road and the road is sized right. But the second that road reduces lanes, and the cars are still the same number of cars, or it reduces lanes and there's an accident, now you're slowed down even more. So all the cars and all the lanes are slow because of the 1 or 2 lane.
And I can
problems up
tell
here.
you, it cascades down. So, you'll start seeing spikes. And so you have the advantage of kind of knowing where your bottleneck is. Those of us who are consuming that out here, we just go, it's taken 26 seconds to fulfill this 4-second request. So,
And I was just gonna mention that Dave Wilcox has posted a couple of comments in the chat, but most recently he said about some payer responses, systems are brought down by the flood of requests. This is another impact.
Yep, that's what I was talking about earlier. Like, we were unprepared when that first happened. And I'll tell you, it seems like it came out of the blue. I mean, I would think that over the course of years, it would have slowly ramped up, especially as payers are consolidating and providers are consolidating, and we have fewer payers with larger numbers of members. We have fewer providers with the same or more number of members or patients. So you have these two bookends of volume potential, and it just seems like over the last probably year or year and a half, it has escalated. Like, the volume has gotten whole different ballgame.
And Donna, I just want to let you know that.
I know the camera's on.
But you need to move forward a little bit so everyone can see you and not me. Just- Okay, moving on,
I
sorry.
was gonna say, move the water bottle.
Just gonna put my breath.
Joe?
Go ahead.
One of the challenges with the spike and problem is bad automation rules, where retries are put in place. So what happens is whenever there's an outage someplace in the stream, and there was
They
a survey that was done that,
Most do have
the
retries.
average eligibility transaction goes through 2.5 hops. And a half hop is probably what the problem is, but anyways, so they keep trying to retry, and it just, that's what really hammers the systems, because error handling and recovery logic will eventually just, you're logging more than you can possibly do. And so,
and some of those algorithms are not good algorithms.
oh,
They'll
no,
be,
not at all.
they'll be retrying. If you group them by the interchange control number, you can see hundreds of them
Yes.
in a half an hour or something. It's
And
insane.
again, it's what is the timeliness, or where can you, if you get a system unavailable and fire off in a minute, 30 different requests.
Yep.
Guess what? You're probably gonna get 30 system unavailables, but you caused a bigger problem with the system becoming available.
Yes, yeah. It's funny, it's not funny. I made someone at work cry one day. This is like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Because, no, it wasn't.
And Donna does think that's
Is
funny.
that the only
You made them cry.
Yes, because
one occurrence or a occurrence?
this particular occurrence, it was about, so I oversee a system that is so that same eligibility system that we were just talking about when you do our hopeful workflow is you do an EMB inquiry through your electronic channel, whatever it is, whether it's fire, whether it's X12, it doesn't matter. It could be a portal verification where you're just doing content equivalent, but not format. You find out you need to call for whatever reason you call. You get in through our phone system. And again, we hope that it's contained and we don't have to route you out to an agent. But some of these bots, they go over and over and over and they ask all these questions. Like we've listened to some of these bots that are, like it will go on with one member asking all these questions and just building on it. And it goes on for 45 minutes. And then they get over to a CA and that CA has to answer another 45 minutes of questions because they're basically revalidating everything that was done through the electronic channel and done through what should have been call contained because they answered the question, but the bot somehow got out. And now the bot is talking to a human. That system that our human person, our CA is running is a system that we have, 2 or 3, 4,000 CAs that are supporting these phone calls from the members and providers every single day. And they have, handle times that they try to stick with and resolution, first call resolution. And what happened was there was a problem with this desktop system. Getting back, same backend system, the same EMB system that I use, that the phone call channel uses, that the portals use. They use the same backend system, but they were having a problem and their leader on the business side told them all 4,000 of them to log off and log back on and see if it was still happening. We were like, you just contributed to the problem and doubled the issue. Because if they were already having the problem, don't ask 4,000 people to log off and log back on. But that's ultimately what happened. And that's the ingenious problem that we come up with is we don't give people like good practices on how to do retry. How do you revalidate? And that is a prime example of where this paper that we could put together could help go into that direction and say, this is the kind of the workflow and maybe the type of error handling you should do, what the retry logic should be on the vendor side, what the internal system can do when they get the 270 in potentially. Maybe they don't have to retry, maybe they hold it. Maybe they have a way to hold it. They close that transaction out, but then they possibly reprocess it if they can, and they maybe have an open connection still and they can send it through an open connection. There's a bunch of things that we in this room probably aren't going to solve everything, but we could come up with some ideas. And the retry logic is the perfect prime example of one of those aspects of this paper that could make a difference.
Between that and coverage discovery.
Yep.
There's no doubt
Right.
what we've seen.
And it even translates to, I guess you guys were talking about claim status earlier. It translates to the same problem in the claim status world. A claim is filed and within seconds of the claim file, they're doing claim status inquiries. Like the person hasn't even received the claim yet in the system and propagated it through their system yet. For all of a sudden a claim status inquiry to come in and say it's pended or it's not yet in the system. So it's the same problem is in different spaces. It's just the best practices that we can come up with. And mind you, these are just best practices. These aren't hard and fast rules. So it's not like anyone's going to listen to us necessarily, but it would be nice to have a nice mix of solutions from a nice mix of bodies, whether it's a payer, a provider, a clearinghouse, or a vendor. So that way we don't like pigeonhole them in one solution and say, well, it's the payer's fault or it's the provider's fault. And then it's like everybody else is pointing finger.
Well, it would be good to know, when you get a bunch of those system, not available or what, I can't remember the exact verbiage, but we just, on the receiving end, you never know what causes that. You just retry and eventually you get it. And so you never know really what's happened there. And so without that insight, you can't control your business processes on this end to be better. So if we knew that, and some things you can kind of figure out, it's like, okay, Monday morning at, 7:30, okay, yeah. Certain things you can kind of see, but sometimes many of us are several times removed from the actual provider processes, so you don't necessarily know. It would be great if we could get some, and I know this is asking for too much, but it'd be great if we got the explanations for what happens, that everybody just goes, and then we just resend.
You guys are like I love how you guys are playing right into what I'm gonna be talking about Thursday morning with the X12 hat on that I'm gonna be wearing, because there's a number of things that are happening in the new version of the X12 270, 271 that you guys can help build that solution in the future. And I say that because that AAA, that code value that we're all used to today, the AAA 42, that's only at like the 2000A, 2100A loop level, that essentially we've made it so it's an external code, no longer internal. So you're not bound by that AAA 42 if something's not working. We've given people an opportunity through those new error reason codes that they can do one that is just for, say, member, or one that says we can give you the benefits, but we can't give you a CUME, or whatever the case is. So we can go and make requests now. The industry can make requests to say, I want an error reason code that tells this story. So it's not always going to be a system unavailable and you don't know the reason. So you can get more details in the code value itself. We just need people to submit the code.
And maybe get partial data back.
Yeah, and we have a code value out there that has that we can give you eligibility, but we can't give you benefits. And that would be another recommendation for this
I like
paper,
that.
which is, don't just say the whole transaction has to die. If you can get to membership, but you can't get to benefits, then say, here's the membership and their eligibility, and maybe you do an EBV with the cannot process with a message that says the benefit system is down, or it's undergoing maintenance, or whatever the case is.
And then again, that has to be built in at the
Yeah.
sender's
Both.
or the submitter point of view of the logic tree of if I get this, then that. Because sometimes the system is so down, you're not gonna get a
You're not gonna
AAA
get-
42.
Right, right.
Then
You're
that's
not
not
getting
gonna
anything. You're gonna get an HTTP error
Yeah,
possibly
and
that
the
says
problem
everything's
is
dead.
if you're going through an intermediary, they're gonna flood that intermediary,
Right.
and that intermediary has to respond back with the same, hey, there's nobody at the other end that's responding.
And I'm not trying to, I'm just gonna say, if Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, if we don't get a response from whomever we're trying to get the benefits from our internal systems, we also do support other payers, like I said earlier. We automatically send a AAA 42 so that we are compliant
Right.
after a certain amount of time. And
Yeah.
because we're trying to cover the compliance perspective, but that's not always the right answer. Maybe if we waited a little bit longer, we would get some information, but we don't know where that sweet spot is. And so this would be helpful for us as well. I mean, for
I mean,
everyone.
I've learned a lot just in here from what y'all described in here and see, I didn't know that there was these different levels. And that it might have to get through all those levels, and that helps me conceptualize what I can say back
Right.
to what, or maybe even how I ask a question. So I mean, I thought it was really good stuff.
Nick has.
Would it perhaps make sense to add something, I don't know, in the AAA segment for the payer to give a recommended retry wait time?
Well, yes, that AAA 04, there's not a lot of codes in there today.
Yeah,
And there really isn't in 8060 either, where it says resubmit in 30 days, why we pick 30 days and not like 3 days or 3 hours. Or do not resubmit, or
Sure.
please correct and resubmit.
I don't know that a lot of systems would necessarily want to read that on a payer by payer basis and
Well,
store it.
but I was
do a
thinking,
retry.
if we had like a specific field for it instead of like
Yeah.
a code that's either just 30 days or.
The electronic queue is basically what you would use that for, and a submitting system would be. You would evaluate that code, re-queue the request. Again, send the same type of response.
So rather than like making it like kind of macro across everything, you would use it in that physical retry. You just pull it out of that 271 or that response and then do your retry at that range from.
Yeah, and it was just
That makes more
re-queue it
sense. That makes more sense.
however long it takes, because now it's an external port source, you could.
Rather than having this flat algorithm.
Yeah, it's the whole thing is that. Computer system is talking to systems, that's what we're trying to get done. So we can avoid human interactions, but the problem is that systems don't all talk at the same level. or even the same length. So
What's the?
standards is supposed to help with that as far as the message unified.
Well, even in the best of times, some things can go wrong. Sometimes you just have full performance for other
Okay.
things.
Just the times nothing goes.
But that's true. That's the opposite. Classic for that, which is fine.
We just have few best times.
Zero. 332. Sorry, we're looking something up.
Another thing that I would love to see,
Yeah,
this white paper describe or give information about what the source of truth is. Or how we determine the source of truth. Because that causes a lot of challenges in the industry. Where, especially from a clearinghouse perspective, we get a lot of providers that think that we just kind of make up these eligibility responses, like, oh yeah, you get the random member not eligible.
yeah,
You know, we're getting things back from a system, so we could define where that source of truth is from. So that they know that who's issuing that response. And
Yes.
is it valid?
so you're in luck in 8060. And so I said, y'all are stealing my thunder, you guys can just sleep in. Because you're gonna know everything before you leave here today. But that's what, we have addressed some of those things in 8060. The source of truth is a good example. We have a new code in the 21, not really a new code, but we do have same rule that says if there's other payers or plans to let them know who that other payer plan is. But then we also have these values in the 2120 NM 101 that give people the opportunity of using that new 2120 NM1 value to help identify if there's basically some kind of third party, or what we called it, a claim routing entity in some cases. Like if you know you have someone else that's playing the go-between in the claim space, then have that person or organization identified. And one of the benefits, and I was going to show you a few of the, I'm cheating. I'm wearing kind of two hats here. So ignore the fact that I'm not fully playing the sub work group co-chair with Amanda here. I'm also kind of playing my Thursday morning role. But you're going to see that there's this party performing validation that kind of helps when there's another person that might be helping determine the eligibility. And then we have another one that's this routing point, which we talked about, the claim routing entity. And then we have this organization completing configuration change. So there's some information about like whether or not there's someone else involved in this whole picture. And then we've also added this self-insured, which isn't necessarily like the person that's self-insured. Maybe it's a self-insured ASO account. So saying this is an ASO account or a self-insured commercial policy. So you might have to go to this, maybe it's a union or a labor fund that's going to tell you on every paycheck cycle whether or not somebody has coverage or not, because it's all about the previous 2 weeks payment cycle, if they worked 40 hours or not. If this 2 weeks, they're covered at 100%. So we've introduced some of that stuff in the next guide, or should I say X12 has introduced some of that stuff in the next version of the guide. But I also wanted to show you, and I'm only going to pick the closest one, the AAA, that this AAA now, this is essentially what we've done is we've basically taken out some of these values in the AAA 04. And so some places you only have 2 values. If you're down at that benefit level and you have a problem that we have to send you back some kind of EB message, like EBV, for example, which may or may not be in the external code set, we're going to give you 2 options. You're either going to correct something so you can resubmit the 270, and we found that there was a problem with whatever you sent us, which is why we can't get you back what you need to have, or it's so beyond repair that don't even bother. Just resubmission not allowed. Like essentially that would be the call us because there's nothing you can give us that's going to give us enough information for us to answer this benefit inquiry. So every one of these new AAAs that are introduced, they have this new, what we call AAA 05, and that is something that you can go to the x12.org. I know you just told me that you're. Yep, okay. So then if you go to the x12.org, her enter key doesn't.
My
work,
enter key
so
doesn't work.
She's got a fancy way to work around that.
Yeah, I've been doing it.
So there's this error reason code list, and this is how, now this is the list that's been externalized, which means it can grow as much as the industry's needs are. So you can see, there's a few new codes that are here, that the benefit utilization information for this response is restricted by the responding system. Like, maybe there's a problem with some identity theft, and we don't want to give this information out. So we're not going to give you any benefit information because we don't trust you. Or in some cases, like the information sources system encountered errors preventing benefit related information from being returned. Or that same system encountered errors that prevent the eligibility, coverage, or policy information from being returned. So now you can see, like, you can do eligibility, but I can't do benefits. Now you get to return an EB with active coverage and a AAA that says, hey, by the way, we can't get you the benefits. So now you can have an EB and a AAA in the same 271, where in current state you can't. Unless you're erroring something that was at that lower level. So there's a whole bunch of new stuff that have been done at the, demand of our industry to get us to a point where we can do better with almost the same format and help those.
I think maybe they'll
Run in.
maybe they'll tell us on Thursday if
Well,
you
that I
show
don't
up.
know. So that's, well,
timeline.
we would need our CMS partners here.
I
for
know,
that,
I
but,
was-
that would be lovely if they were here. Thanks, government.
I think they said some of the contractors will be here from CMS, but they aren't going to, what did you? To listen. To listen.
Oh,
But that
yeah,
doesn't really,
they're
I know, I'm just trying. to-
Especially some of the ones that may live in DC already. It's like, just stop here on the way in. Or on the way in. Or are you going in? Maybe you're not even going in. So yeah, you're going to the gym and we're on the way. Come on in,
I'm
So,
listening.
yeah, listen in and let's move. So I think that this is a two-pronger, one, that first project proposal, if we want to go forward with it, about the reasons for calls. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here that might help in 8060 that is really going to be guidance today, but tomorrow it might be more expectation. And then this whole pre-verification or roster work, that is probably one that we could still think in advance of 8060, but kind of look at what are some of the best practices we can implement right now, regardless of 8060 being mandated or not, and how can we shape this so we're not hurting the needs of the industry that have to do this verification, but we're also letting the payers breathe a little.
And so, with all this said, we are trying to get feedback of exactly what you just said. Do we try to tackle both of these things? They're similar and they could go together in some ways. Or should we start with one over the other? And we've gone into depth now, so if we need to take a step back and say, well, this is this one at a high level and this is this one, we certainly can, but or again, send out, ask again, send out a poll, but I just feel like we continue to meet with the subwork group monthly and talk about these things, and we can just pick one too. Donna and I can, but we really care about your perspective. Again, it's not just her and I supporting. There's various different perspectives, and we are both payers, even though she wears various hats as well. So anyways, any thoughts? Yes.
I would recommend anything that can be worked on and put out in the short term would be defined by what the industry or whatever the audience is can do today and best practices until such time that the timeline for the updated standards is in place. Because we've all learned from attachments and everything else that nobody's gonna move until.
It becomes a mandate.
Right.
Yep. Well, and that's part of that was part of the, why we're still talking about the reasons for calls in 2025. When we did this survey back in 2017, 2018, because we've given people, some of the raw data was that people aren't supporting procedure codes. So that's the reason why they have to call, because they're not supporting procedure codes. And so therefore they don't know if a prior auth is required from a procedure code standpoint, because payers aren't supporting the procedure codes. So then we tried to put a little bit of ruling in the 80-60, 80-40 versions to kind of move the needle a little bit towards the procedure codes. And in the meantime, CAQH Core came out with their operating rules that they brought forward to NCPHS Subcommittee on Standards, I think in 2023, maybe it was 2023, where they have built the operating rules that require that payers support procedure codes for physical therapy, occupational therapy, surgery, and imaging. That's a huge list of procedure codes that would be required to be supported. So the transaction supports it, doesn't require it in 85010. The operating rules, if it went forward and were named as, you know, a 5010 augment to what we currently have for operating rules, would require it. That means we've taken a huge chunk of some of those prior auth needs where you have to indicate if prior auth is required or not. Using the 271, we will move the needle. And then when 8060 comes, there's a little bit more requirement in there about basically if there is any effect on a member's payment or a provider's payment, that you have to be able to support. Like if that indicator that says a prior auth is required makes a difference between a member getting charged $1,500 or $5,000 or a provider getting reimbursed $1,500 or $200, then you have to indicate that prior auth. If you can't figure it out based on that generic service type code, essentially that's pushing you in that you need to be able to start supporting the procedure code, because we're basically saying you can't damage either the provider or the payer because you can't return this information. You have to return. So that's 8060. So if the operating rules could get us closer, the industry will have more. And that is part of the reduction of the phone calls that came out of that survey, was that people aren't supporting procedure codes and can't figure out what the limitations are or what the copay co-insurance deductible is, because it's a procedure code and it doesn't map nicely to the service type codes. So that would be another prime example of why we could do the best practices for the survey and reducing phone calls, just not focus on all 12 of the issues that we pointed out that were causes for the phone calls. We could pick one or two.
What is your view on the enhancements or the requirements that price transparency has kind of pushed onto this transaction?
Before you answer, Donna, I just want to do a time check.
Yeah, because there were 2 minutes left.
Actually, 90 seconds.
You're on it.
Donna, we'll let you go next year. 15
Not-
minutes. It's just if you.
I mean, who's leading this is February.
Who's gonna tell Donna that she
I
can't?
wasn't telling her, I was just giving her a time check. Go on.
I kept looking, I kept checking. Now that you guys are eating into my first 30 seconds. I would say I do think price transparency has a lot to do with it. That's probably something that I would look more towards, like the American Hospital Association and the American Medical Association, to say, how do they think it's going to make a difference? Because from a transaction or an EMB work group, it all rolls right into it, but I don't know that it's not gonna take away from what the EMB purpose is, but I do think it's gonna make it easier for people to understand what they're gonna be on the hook.
Because I really, when I look at price transparency and the fight it has been to get away from service types and more into, hey, this information is going to be contained in the claim. What do we need to do to get paid? What do we need to do as far as eligibility and benefits and everything else? That really, to me, pushes more towards the eliminating service types
Yes,
and moving more towards the values that are going to be submitted in the claim.
I would agree. And I would also say that once you start introducing procedure codes, we have to, because there's no way around it. also have to include that conversation diagnosis codes. So
And
we're-
pick picks.
it's a twofer, yeah. Picks are procedure based and ICD-10.
Well,
And, you know, getting into the whole space, but we also, we can't forget that there's a whole bunch of other codes that are out there, like our NDC codes, our drug
that'd
codes,
be wonderful.
our American Dental
This is
Association
a good place
codes.
to stop.
Yes, there's a whole bunch of codes, so we could be biting off a lot more than we can
Yeah.
chew if we say procedure codes, so that's why if we look at that list, we should probably pick a topic and say, do we want to focus on, say, the dental procedure codes? How many times are we having automation and electronic channels checking your eligibility and benefits through the dental world? If we bite off that segment, we might be able to expand it and say, well, will the same solution or best practice apply in the medical world? Does it work in the drug world? And if it doesn't, then we could have 3 different or 2 different papers for procedure codes for each of those and just limit it to procedure codes, for example.
And this is why it's honestly taken so long to decide, because it is so complex, or there are so many flavors or scenarios, and how big do we wanna,
Okay.
take it.
Rebecca from the ADA said that the dental is only 800 codes, so it's easy. So we could maybe start with the dental codes and move from
Home
there.
infusion is even smaller.
Yeah. So that's what I think we have to decide as a group. Do we want to focus on both papers? Do we have a preference one over the other? And if we have a preference one over the other, how can we make it so it's
Manageable.
it's a manageable and attainable, you know, build it out as a SMART goal, specific, measurable,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, all of it.
All those things. I think you should choose one. I
I
think,
think maybe, yeah.
yeah,
With the
after
feedback
this
and stuff.
conversation and everything, I think trying to do 2, you know, if you have the extra time at the end of the year.
Woo-hoo!
I mean, I might. We can also do it offline and send an email communication out. Or
I
whatever.
go for one. I mean, I think
I
either
would
one works.
Okay, but what are
So
we saying is what?
Head says, is we could do 2 out of 3, but head says we're doing the volume one. as
Okay,
Heads, and tails would be, we're doing the reasons for calls one.
okay.
What if it's?
Am I calling it?
It wa-
Call it.
I'm calling
Oh,
it.
you go.
Head.
It's heads, so we're doing the volume one.
Well, it was heads you win, tails you lose, so there you go.
Okay.
Want proof? Heads.
I get to pick now, oh no, she already said.
Okay, so I think this was a fast meeting.
Define fast.
It was an hour, but we had
It
like
did go
5
by
minutes
fast.
worth of
It did go by
of
fast.
technical challenges up front, but we do have at least a direction based on one penny.
Any paper now.
Hey,
Yeah.
decision we made.
Yeah.
I mean,
One decision
Hey,
we made.
that's good. That's progress.
Yeah, thank you so much for
Thank you,
everyone
everyone.
online. Appreciate it and hope to see or have you on tomorrow as we have more of the conference going on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coaching.